I'd lived in that apartment for almost 3 years, long enough that nothing about it surprised me anymore. Same narrow hallway, same beige walls, same uneven floor near the kitchen. It was the kind of place you stop noticing because it never changes. That's why the door stood out immediately. It wasn't dramatic or hidden. It was just, there. A plain wooden door at the end of the hallway, where there had always been a solid wall. At first, I didn't panic. I told myself I must have overlooked it before. That happens. People forget details. But the more I stood there, staring at it, the more uncomfortable I felt. Because I knew that wall. I'd leaned against it while tying my shoes. I'd stacked boxes there when I moved in. A door had never existed in that spot. I tried to explain it away logically. Memory is unreliable. Apartments blend together. So I pulled out old photos on my phone, pictures from when I first moved in. I zoomed into the hallway, checking angles, shadows, anything. In every photo, the hallway ended exactly where I remembered. No door. Just wall. I measured the space with a tape. The hallway was now shorter by almost 3 feet. That space had come from somewhere. I knocked on the door lightly, expecting hollow drywall. Instead, it felt solid. Heavy. Like it had always been part of the building. That's when denial stopped working. Because if the door was new, it wasn't done sloppily. It was done perfectly. Over the next few days, I started noticing small things. The air near the door felt colder. Not dramatically, just enough to register. Sometimes there was a faint smell, dust, old wood, something stale. At night, the hallway seemed darker, like the light didn't spread the same way anymore. Once, half asleep, I thought I heard something shift behind the door. Not footsteps. More like pressure, as if something leaned and then moved away. I stopped walking past it without looking. And every time I looked, I felt the same thing. Not fear exactly. More like being watched without eyes. I contacted the building manager. He laughed at first, assumed I meant a closet. When I showed him, his expression changed. He pulled up the building's original plans. According to them, my apartment ended exactly where the wall used to be. There was nothing behind it. No storage, no maintenance space, no unit. He couldn't explain where the door came from, and he didn't want to dig further. That was the moment I understood something important. The problem wasn't the door. It was that the building itself didn't acknowledge it. After checking the building plans, I couldn't stop thinking about how quickly everyone wanted the conversation to end. The manager stopped returning my calls. Emails went unanswered. When I ran into him in the lobby, he acted distracted, like he hadn't seen me. That reaction bothered me more than the door itself. If this were just a mistake, someone would have tried to explain it. Instead, everyone seemed relieved when I stopped asking. That's when I started paying attention to the neighbors. People who used to nod or say hello suddenly avoided eye contact. One man paused when I mentioned the door, then quietly said, "Some spaces aren't meant to be reopened." He refused to say more. That was the first time I realized the door wasn't new to everyone. Just new to me. I spent nights searching for anything related to the building, old permits, renovation logs, archived news articles. Most records were clean, almost too clean. One renovation stood out, dated decades back, listed vaguely as structural correction. No details. No explanation. The more I searched, the more I noticed something strange. References to the building before that year showed a slightly different layout. Floor plans that didn't match the current structure. It was subtle, but consistent. Something had been removed, not added. And whatever it was, it had left behind an empty outline, an absence that didn't stay empty forever. That's when the doors started changing. Not visibly. Behaviorally. Sometimes it felt colder than the rest of the hallway. Other times, warmer. Once, I swore the smell coming from behind it was different than before, less dusty, more lived in. I tested it, standing still in the hallway late at night, lights off. The air near the door moved slightly, like pressure adjusting. I hadn't touched it. That detail stayed with me. Doors don't react unless something on the other side does. Opening the door didn't feel like curiosity anymore. It felt like obligation. When I finally did, the space inside was smaller than I expected. Narrow. Windowless. The walls were unfinished, concrete stained unevenly, as if time had passed differently there. The floor had marks, dragged lines, scuffs, impressions that suggested weight. In the corner were scratches, deep and irregular, at about shoulder height. They weren't decorative. They were attempts. I didn't hear anything while I was inside, but I felt something unmistakable, the sense that the room wasn't empty in the way rooms usually are. After that night, the apartment stopped feeling neutral. Sounds traveled differently. The hallway felt longer sometimes, shorter other times. I started sleeping with my bedroom door locked, not because I expected something to come out, but because I felt like something had already been through. The door in the hallway hasn't moved since. It hasn't opened. It hasn't changed. But every now and then, when I walk past it, I get the impression that it's not waiting for me to open it again. It's waiting for me to forget it exists. And I don't think forgetting is an option anymore.